The hallowed halls of Konya's madrasa hummed with the intellectual fervor of Maulana Jalaluddin Muhammad Rumi, a scholar revered throughout the Seljuk Empire. His lectures on jurisprudence, theology, and philosophy drew crowds, his words precise, his mind a labyrinth of sacred knowledge. He sat enthroned on a high chair, a symbol of his unchallenged authority, surrounded by scrolls and the eager faces of his disciples. Each gesture, each pronouncement reinforced his esteemed position, a beacon of Islamic scholarship. Yet, beneath the veneer of learned composure, a nascent dissatisfaction stirred, a quiet longing for a truth deeper than words could convey, a spiritual current barely perceptible even to himself. He meticulously organized his thoughts, his life, and his teachings, living a life of predictable, respected piety, utterly convinced of his righteous path, a path paved with logic and tradition. His ego, while not overtly arrogant, was robust, built upon decades of accolades and intellectual triumphs. An unshakable edifice of self-importance, born of his profound academic achievements and his inherited spiritual lineage. The air of the madrasa was thick with admiration, and Rumi, though outwardly humble, implicitly absorbed and reflected it, his identity inextricably linked to his revered status. One sweltering afternoon, a figure unlike any Konya had ever seen strode into the crowded marketplace, a whirlwind of disheveled grandeur. He was Shams Tabriz, a wandering dervish, his eyes burning with an ancient fire, his clothes simple but radiating an intense, unsettling energy. He seemed to possess an almost feral wisdom, an untamed spirit that defied the structured piety of the city. As Rumi, accompanied by his retinue, passed through the bazaar, Shams, with an audacious disregard for social norms, cut directly across their path. The bustling market fell silent, the air crackling with an unspoken tension. Shams's gaze fixed upon Rumi, an unblinking, penetrating stare that seemed to strip away the layers of scholastic pretense, seeing directly into the core of the esteemed scholar's soul. It was a confrontation not just of two men, but of two worlds, the orderly, intellectual realm of Rumi and the wild, mystical domain embodied by Shams. This abrupt, uninvited intrusion was the first tremor, a harbinger of the earthquake that was about to shatter Rumi's meticulously constructed reality. Shams, without so much as a bow, posed a question that pierced the heart of Rumi's intellectual pride. Who was greater, he challenged, his voice raspy yet resonant, the Prophet Muhammad or Bayezid Bastami? Rumi, taken aback by the sheer impertinence, replied with the obvious and expected answer, Muhammad, of course. Shams, however, shook his head slowly, a faint, knowing smile playing on his lips. Then why, he pressed, did Muhammad say, my heart is veiled from God 70 times a day, while Bayezid declared, glory be to me, how great is my majesty? The question hung heavy in the air, a direct assault on Rumi's conventional understanding, a paradox designed to expose the limitations of mere scriptural knowledge. Rumi's mind, accustomed to logical progressions and established doctrines, reeled. The audacity of the questioner, the unconventional nature of the query, struck him not as blasphemy, but as an unsettling truth seeking to emerge from the depths of his own consciousness. He felt a sudden, profound intellectual vertigo, as if the foundations of his learning had shifted beneath his feet. The challenge was not merely academic, it was existential, demanding a surrender of intellectual certainty. The challenge from Shams had not merely puzzled Rumi, it had utterly disarmed him. For the first time, his vast knowledge felt inadequate, a mere collection of facts that failed to grasp the living essence of truth. His usual eloquence abandoned him, and he could offer no immediate, satisfying retort. Instead, a profound sense of bewilderment washed over him, followed by an intense, almost magnetic pull towards the enigmatic dervish. Shams' eyes, deep pools of ancient wisdom, seemed to reflect a truth Rumi had always sought but never found in his books. The encounter had cracked open a fissure in his intellectual fortress, revealing a longing for direct experience over mere interpretation. His students and family observed his disquiet with growing concern. Their beloved master was visibly shaken, his usual serene composure replaced by an uncharacteristic restlessness. He felt an inexplicable urgency, a compelling need to understand this man who had dared to question the very bedrock of his scholarly existence. The world, which had once felt so solid and predictable, now shimmered with an unsettling possibility, a hint of dimensions beyond his current perception, all thanks to the disruptive presence of Shams. Rumi invited Shams to his home, and what followed was an unbroken period of intense, consuming dialogue. Days bled into nights and weeks into months as the two men locked themselves away, immersed in conversations that transcended ordinary discourse. Rumi's library, once a sanctuary of quiet study, became a crucible for a radical transformation. Shams dismantled Rumi's intellectual constructs piece by piece, not with argument, but with direct, searing insight, challenging every assumption, every ingrained belief. They spoke of love, of the beloved, of the nature of existence, and the path to spiritual union. Rumi found himself shedding layers of academic pride, his ego slowly eroding under the constant, relentless fire of Shams's presence. He spoke little of his old pursuits, his lectures ceased, and his books lay untouched. Shams taught him not through propositions, but through presence, through the raw, unmediated experience of being. Rumi felt his inner world shifting violently, a profound reordering of his spiritual landscape, as if a dam holding back an ocean of mystical understanding had suddenly burst open, flooding his consciousness with an intoxicating new reality, far beyond the dry logic of his previous life. As Rumi's absorption in Shams deepened, his students, colleagues, and family grew increasingly alarmed and resentful. Their revered master, once the embodiment of scholarly tradition, had become a recluse, abandoning his duties, his lectures, and his community. His son, Sultan Walad, and other prominent disciples found themselves neglected, their intellectual and spiritual guidance abruptly severed. Whispers turned to murmurs, and murmurs to outright complaints. Shams, the foreign dervish, was seen as an intruder, a disruptive force who had bewitched their beloved Maulana. They feared for Rumi's reputation, for his sanity, and for the very stability of their madrasa. Shams's unconventional ways, his disregard for social hierarchy and religious formality, only fueled their animosity. He was perceived as arrogant, dangerous, and a threat to everything they held sacred. The once harmonious community was fractured, its members torn between loyalty to their teacher and their profound distrust of the man who had stolen his attention. This escalating discomfort created a hostile atmosphere, a palpable tension that pressed down on Rumi, urging him to choose between his old life and the captivating new path Shams presented. Shams, acutely aware of the growing resentment, deliberately intensified his provocations, pushing Rumi further away from his past life and towards a complete surrender. He would often speak in riddles, challenge Rumi's remaining academic pride, or even openly mock his former intellectual pursuits. Shams understood that for Rumi to truly transform, his ego, the very foundation of his identity as a revered scholar, had to be shattered beyond repair. He demanded not just intellectual assent, but a total spiritual divestment, a shedding of all worldly attachments and preconceived notions. He might demand Rumi perform menial tasks or spend hours in silent contemplation rather than discussion, forcing Rumi to confront his internalized sense of superiority and the comfort of his established routine. Each act, each word, was a carefully aimed blow at the remaining vestiges of Rumi's self-importance, designed to strip him bare of his worldly identity and leave him vulnerable to the divine truth that Shams embodied. Shams was not merely a teacher. He was a mirror, reflecting Rumi's own limitations and potential, compelling him to shed his learned self and embrace the unknown. The incessant internal and external pressure reached a fever pitch. Rumi found himself in an agonizing crucible, torn between the comfortable, respected life he had built and the radical, intoxicating truth Shams offered. The whispers of his community, the pleas of his family, the gnawing doubts about his own sanity, all waged war against the profound spiritual awakening Shams ignited within him. He wrestled with his identity, with the decades of learning and public acclaim, feeling the immense weight of expectation. There were moments of doubt, of fear, of an almost physical pain as his old self resisted dissolution. His mind, once so clear and rational, now felt like a battlefield, a storm of conflicting loyalties and burgeoning spiritual insights. He retreated into himself, experiencing a dark night of the soul, a complete dismantling of his internal architecture. This was the precipice, the moment where he had to choose between clinging to his scholarly ego and plunging headfirst into the abyss of unknowing, trusting that divine truth awaited him on the other side. The breaking point was not a single event, but a cumulative agony of self-annihilation, leading to an inevitable, liberating collapse. In a moment of profound spiritual ecstasy and utter exhaustion, Rumi finally surrendered. The struggle ceased, the resistance dissolved, and the last vestiges of his scholarly ego crumbled away. He recognized that Shams was not merely a teacher, but a divine mirror, reflecting the beloved back to him, embodying the very truth he had sought in books but never truly found within. It was a complete capitulation, a joyous abandonment of his former identity, his intellectual prowess, and his esteemed position. He no longer cared for reputation, for public opinion, or for the comforting structures of his past life. He shed the cloak of the learned professor and embraced the wild, untamed spirit that Shams represented. This was not a defeat, but a triumphant liberation, a realization that true knowledge lay not in accumulated facts, but in the direct, unmediated experience of the divine. He was no longer Maulana Jalaluddin Muhammad, the revered scholar, but a lover, consumed by an insatiable thirst for union with the beloved, a vessel emptied to be filled with divine love. With the surrender of his ego, Rumi underwent a radical metamorphosis. The precise, logical scholar was replaced by an ecstatic poet, a whirling dervish whose very being became a testament to divine love. His lectures transformed into passionate discourses on love and longing, his words flowing like a river, infused with an unprecedented spiritual fervor. His poetry, born from the depths of his transformed heart, began to pour forth, spontaneous and incandescent, articulating the inexpressible mysteries of union with the beloved. He danced not out of performance, but out of an overwhelming surge of divine energy, his body becoming a conduit for celestial rhythms. His physical appearance shifted. His eyes, once intense with academic focus, now shone with a boundless, compassionate light. He was no longer confined by the strictures of dogma or the weight of expectation. He moved with an effortless grace, embodying the very essence of love and spiritual freedom. The students who remained, and those who later joined, recognized not just a teacher, but a living embodiment of the divine, a man utterly remade by the crucible of Shams' presence, radiating an intoxicating spiritual magnetism that drew souls to him like moths to a flame. Though Shams eventually departed, driven away by the lingering animosity of Rumi's former disciples, his presence had irrevocably transformed Rumi. The scholar was dead, and in his place stood Rumi, the universally beloved poet and mystic, the founder of the Mevlevi order, whose legacy of whirling dervishes and ecstatic poetry continues to inspire millions across the globe. Rumi's surrender to Shams was not an act of submission to a man, but a surrender to the divine truth Shams embodied, a shedding of the false self to reveal the authentic, interconnected soul. His ego, once a formidable barrier, had been dismantled, allowing the boundless ocean of divine love to flood his being. He became a living testament to the power of spiritual friendship and the courageous act of self-annihilation for the sake of higher truth. The transformation was complete, a monumental shift from intellectualism to intuition, from dogma to direct experience, leaving behind a timeless body of work that continues to guide seekers on the path of love, forever echoing the profound encounter that stripped him bare and revealed the universe within.